What's up, horror fans? Danny here from the Lassercast, and we're going to be talking about episode 2 of season 3 of Creepshow on Shudder. And this episode ties directly into a video that we dropped on our channel yesterday, and that is a phenomenal interview we did with the great Josh Malerman, author of Bird Box, Goblin. He has a new book coming out very soon called Pearl, and he was nice enough to give us over an hour of his time for an interview. So go on our channel and check that video out when you're done with this review, and give the channel a subscribe if you haven't. We have a ton of horror content, and it's October now, so we have Pete and I discussed a big month ahead of horror content that I think you'll be interested in. So subscribe to the video, subscribe to the channel, like this video, all those basic YouTube things that we all tell you, but it really does help us out. So we're going to be talking about Season 3, Episode 2 of Creepshow that debuted on Shudder last night. The first segment is called Skeletons in the Closet, directed by Greg Nicotero, story by Greg Nicotero, written by John Esposito, and this is just like, you could tell Greg Nicotero had this idea in his head for a long time, basically like a love letter to horror fans. It's essentially a Hollywood horror prop museum run by Mr. Lampini, the Lampini Prop Museum, played by Victor Rivera. He runs it with his girlfriend, played by Valerie LeBlanc, and it's just, you know, it's basically an excuse to walk around and show off these amazing props from horror history. You have one of the Phantasm spheres. You have Freddy's glove. You have Ash's chainsaw. So much great stuff. But the centerpiece of the new exhibit is some human skeleton props that were used in various films, from Raiders of the Lost Ark to Poltergeist to Creepshow. And basically, there's a competitor to his prop museum, a rival prop collector named Bateman, who's played by James Remar of Dexter, of The Warriors. You know, here's a guy who you've known for 40 plus years in genre films and television. He was also Raiden in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but let's not bring that one up. And basically, we think that there's going to be like this, you know, rivalry over buying props, but we find out that in reality, Lampini has gotten these skeletons through some nefarious means, and Bateman is trying to blackmail him to get these props for his collection. And we take a very dark turn. And, you know, obviously we're talking, you know, spoilers here, so I don't want to, if you want to go watch episode 2 of Creepshow, season 3, go on Shudder, watch it, then come back and we could talk in this review. But they end up killing Bateman. He had made fun of Danielle, that's Lampini's girlfriend, because she was wearing the knife shoe from one of the James Bond films. Well, she uses that shoe to slit his throat. They take him in the back, and they melt his body down, and they basically turn him into a new skeleton for the exhibit. They also hint that they get rid of his flesh by putting him in trioxin, which is, of course, from Return of the Living Dead. And the long story short is that his skeleton comes back. And it leads to a really fun third act of this segment with great puppetry and props and you know, effects from K&B. And really, this was just a 25-minute love letter to horror fans. I can't imagine anyone watching this and being upset. I genuinely loved it. I had a big smile on my face the whole time. That leads us into the second segment of episode 2 of season 3 of Creepshow, which was written by Josh Malerman. Like I said, I cannot thank Josh Malerman enough. Pete and I, we were so thrilled that he came on our show and gave us so much of his time. A genuinely great guy. He has a new book, Pearl, coming out very soon. But you know him from Bird Box, Mallory, Inspection, Goblin. These are just some of his long list of prolific works. Nominated for the Bram Stoker Award, I think Pete told me 8 times. So we're big Josh Malerman fans. And he wrote this episode called Familiar, which was directed by another favorite of Pete and mine, Joe Lynch, who did Mayhem, which appeared on Joe Bob's Last Drive-In. He also was part of Holliston with Adam Green, one of my favorite quirky horror series. That was up on Shudder also. Familiar is a very interesting little story about a lawyer named, I forgot his name, but played by Andrew Batchelor, and his girlfriend, Fawn, played by Hannah Fearman, who you might remember from VHS. Andrew Batchelor, you might remember because he's in both of the Babysitter films on Netflix, and he's very over the top and very funny in those films. And they're a couple, and they're stumbling home drunk from like a night out, and they see like a 24-hour psychic, and they decide, let's go to the psychic and see what happens. And what I loved about this episode is, and this is the truth, for some bizarre reason, when I used to dabble in like writing horror stories when I was in college, whether it was my creative writing class or something else, I always loved the word soothsayer. And I always had the idea for a story about a guy kind of like me who doesn't believe in any of this, psychic stuff, astrology, or any of that stuff. He's a cynic, and he'd get dragged to a soothsayer, and he would start to freak out. Like it just affected him in a way where he became like a paranoid mess. And I never ended up writing that story because I just had the idea. But I always loved the concept of like cynics who go to psychics or mystics and have really weird effects. Well, in this story, he goes, and while the Boone, I believe his name is giving the Fawn her, telling her all this stuff, reading her palm, he slips the boyfriend a small sheet of paper that just says, "Something bad followed you here." And this sets him off, and he forget about being a cynic anymore. He is straight up paranoid. He is starting to see visions of this like monstrous demon that is following him, to the point where he goes back and he's told that he has a familiar, this type of demon that like latches onto you, and the only way to get rid of it is to trap it with pure love, and then once you trap it in this huge box, you have to like throw it down the lake or like drown it in the water. I love this because it is a total throwback to the original Creepshow. The idea of putting something evil in a giant crate, the idea of a waterlogged zombie coming back at the end reminded me of Ted Danson's and Leslie Nielsen's scene, their segment from the original Creepshow anthology. And I really just love how this episode, how Josh Malerman writes cynics who become paranoid, because I love that idea. I've had that idea in the past, and I wish I could have written something this good. Joe Lynch does a great job here. I like the monster effects. Overall, this episode of Creepshow, the second one of the season, I liked, on the whole, much better than the first episode. This was, and it's funny because one of the things that we talked about with Josh Malerman in our interview was The House with the Head, which was a segment that he wrote back in season 1. That was my favorite episode back then. So, another great job from him writing this segment Familiar. that with skeletons in the closet make this one of the best episodes of Creepshow that you'll see on Shudder. And stay tuned, because every Thursday they have a new episode of Creepshow, and then you'll see me every Friday morning telling you how good it was and why Shudder is a great channel that you need to invest in. And we have a bunch of stuff coming up this October. Happy official beginning of spooky season. Michael Myers is now free to walk the streets, and Pete and I are going to be tackling the Halloween franchise this October, and we're going to try to do it in a kind of a unique way where we bring in some guests to talk about specific films in the Halloween franchise. So for instance, we're going to bring on our daughters, Charlotte and Pepper, to talk about the original 1978 film. We'd like to bring on some other guests. That's what I'm going to be working on today, is trying to get some of these guests to come on our channel. And like I said, great interview with Josh Malerman. Pete had an amazing interview with prolific author Joe Lansdale. That's also up on our channel now. We have reviews of James Wan films, including *Malignant*. We interviewed Max Booth III, the writer of *We Need to Do Something*. *Halloween Kills* comes out in about 2 weeks. So tons of stuff to look forward to this spooky season here on the LassiterCast channel. Like the video, share the video if you can. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And this has been Danny from the LassiterCast saying, have a great day.